लेकिन फीड आ रहा है उसके ऊपर।
Good morning, learners. I welcome you to IGNOU Studio. The topic of discussion today is disaster management. Indira Gandhi National Open University was the first university in the country to offer a program in the area of disaster management way back in the year 1999. It was felt prudent by the Faculty of Public Administration IGNOU to start courses in the area of disaster management because it was a contemporaneous area of concern at that point of time as much as it is today. It is really to be seen that why disaster management and what is disaster management. In fact, when we started working in the area of disaster management in this university, lot many people didn't know about disaster management, and it was only a few who knew about it as well as its significance. As it is the mandate of the university to work in the areas which are of crucial interest and significance to the society, polity and economy, we had started this program in that particular year. Over the period of time, from the 6-month certificate program, we developed further on to a 1-year postgraduate diploma in disaster management. Later than that, one of the electives was added in MA in Public Administration in the area of disaster management. And we are also having PhD program in disaster management under the Public Administration discipline. Besides that, lot many other activities the university had been undertaking in the field of disaster management. When it came, the choice-based credit system initiated by University Grants Commission, we have developed a course on disaster management at the undergraduate level as well. Question is that why disaster management and what is disaster management? Let us try to understand what is disaster management as it is. Primarily when we look at it, it talks of the word disaster. The origin of the word disaster is from the French words désastre, D-E-S-A-S-T-R-E. Des means bad or evil and aster means star. So it is the bad or evil star. And we often find that there are two words which are related to it, that is hazard as well as disaster. So let us try to understand that what is hazard and what is disaster. Hazard is the occurrence at a given site of a physical phenomenon capable of causing loss. A hazard is a natural event while disaster is its consequence. Now, the question which comes to mind is that there may be so many hazards which are taking place but nobody comes to know of it. Why nobody comes to know of it? Could it be in the dens of the forest that something is taking place? Could it be that on the hilltop it is taking place? Could it be that somewhere in the ocean there is some kind of the undercurrent which is there? So nobody comes to know of the hazard. So that is why it is said that a hazard is a natural event while disaster is its consequence. So then what is disaster? Disaster is the consequence of the hazard. So that is why it is said that the disaster results from the impact of the hazard occurrence on man-made structure, components and systems which are weak. This leaves a very strange kind of the phenomenon in our minds and which we wish to understand so far as the Indian scenario is concerned and so far as the normal things which are happening more so in the present day-to-day circumstances. So we would be referring on to that as well in our today's discussion. India, when we look at India as a whole, we find that India is the one which is amongst the nations most vulnerable to natural hazards. In fact, 85% of India's area is vulnerable to one or multiple hazards. More than 58.6% of the land mass of the country is prone to earthquakes. Likewise, 12% of the land is prone to floods. 47-kilometer long line out of the 7,500 kilometers of the coastal line is prone to cyclones and tsunami. 68% of our cultivable land is prone to droughts. If one looks at it from the Indian scenario, one finds that every year thousands of lives and property worth several millions are lost to this particular phenomenon. Now, when that is the thing, when we try to go a little deep into it, we find that disaster is not something very new, or hazard is not something very new which is taking place. It is being there ever since. Probably ever since the creation of the universe, we find that there had been hazards. And in the similar manner, ever since the humanity got into being, we find that there have been disasters which have been taking place. But not much attention was being paid to disaster management in that particular manner in those days as it has started being paid now. If we look at it from the Indian scenario, we find it that, well, when the country got independent and on the 26th of January 1950, when we adopted our constitution, we find that later than that, that's what is mentioned in the constitution, that there are three lists, that is the union list, the state list and the concurrent list. Incidentally, so far as the relief and response is concerned and the rehabilitation, that has been mentioned in the as a state it is included in the state list. And in the 7th schedule of the Constitution of India, there is no mention of the disaster management in any one of these lists. So, by virtue of the fact that the relief is the responsibility of the state and the local administration, disaster management is also being taken care of by the state administration. Nevertheless, the government of India had right from the very beginning, and even as on date now, in a much more concerted manner, it helps and it paves the way for the states to manage the disasters or any kind of the emergencies which do take place over there. That is where it gets into being, which one makes to understand as a student as well as a learner about the disaster management, that what is disaster management? Is it an area of study? Is it a discipline? What is disaster management? Is it interdisciplinary? Is it multidisciplinary? When we look at disaster management per se, we find it that, well, it cuts across many disciplines. For example, if we look into the land use zoning, if we look into the spatial planning, probably disaster management gets it from the discipline of geography. If we look into religion and we look into groups and we look into norms, that is what disaster management has got it from sociology. If we look into planning, if we look into the financial resources and so on, that is what disaster management has got it from economics. If we talk of the acts, we talk of rules and regulations. Often these days you might be listening on, you might be hearing about the Disaster Management Act which came into being in India in the year 2005. So probably that one gets it from the disciplines of political science and public administration. If we talk of the human behavior, we talk of transactions, we talk of leadership, probably disaster management has taken it up from psychology. In the similar manner, if we talk of the simulations, we talk of the mathematical modeling, disaster management has taken it up from mathematics. Likewise, if we talk of the health component thereupon, or the hospital, or the role of the paramedics and so on, probably disaster management has taken up from the discipline of health sciences or from the discipline of medicine and the related areas. So, it is a culmination of the number of things. So, what does it mean then? Does it mean that disaster management is nothing? Because something has been taken from X, something has been taken from Y, and there is a culmination in the form of the disaster management. The other way probably to look at it is that minus disaster management, probably all other things come to a standstill, and it gets more proved in the present day scenario. When world over we are inflicted by this harrowing pandemic, we find that everything is standing still. Nothing is moving. All the governments across the globe, they are worried and they are managing the disaster which is over there, and this kind of the disaster is seeking the attention and energy of all the people and all the resources, everything is put on to side. So that means that the other areas which are there where from disaster management has taken and it has built its edifice on, those areas are all supplementary to disaster management, and probably minus disaster management it becomes very difficult for these areas and these disciplines to go ahead about that. So there lies the importance and significance of the disaster management as it is. When we say that, well, it is interdisciplinary in nature, and so well it moves from one thing on to the other, it brings to focus that what is so special in disaster and the disaster management which needs our attention. Here lies the features of the disaster, which mean that it is a disruption to the normal pattern of life. Think of it, how we, for that matter in India, if we take the example of that, how we were comfortably we were passing our days and we were living when there came this coronavirus in the month of the February, March, so as to say, in India. So slowly and gradually, on the basis of the positive and good, rather effective decision making of the government of India and being complemented by the other state governments also, we find that, well, there are some kind of the checks which are trying to be put into place for the purpose of controlling the effects of the pandemic. So that proves that, well, the disaster, the first essential characteristic or feature of disaster is that it disrupts the normal pattern of life. The way we were living, we are not living in the similar manner now because we are being affected by it. And it is not only that this coronavirus has affected it. You find that every year India faces the fury of the floods. Number of times we have seen the cyclones, we have seen the earthquakes, we have seen landslides and so on, forest fires, and number of the disasters which we are having. Drought is a perennial feature so far as India is concerned. All these activities, when they do take place, this definitely affect or it disturbs the normal pattern of the living of that particular area or the state or the couple of states or 4 states, cluster of states, and so on and so forth. Second feature of this is that the human effects, such as the loss of life and property. It affects the property, or it affects this livestock and so on, and there are the injuries which are sustained, and it also brings into place the effects which are there on the social structure so far as the disaster's effects is concerned, because disaster is an unwelcomed guest. It leaves such a kind of the trail that it is difficult for the sufferers or the victims to overcome it probably all through their life. Of course, it is being said that time is a big healer. With the passage of the time, we tend to forget about whatever the onslaughts had been. But nevertheless, it definitely has a kind of the imprint so far as the human minds are concerned. So from that extent, it is playing a havoc so far as the life of the individual is concerned. Community needs such as shelter, food, clothing, medical assistance, etc. are affected. Individual probably is dependent as well as self-sufficient. We are self-sufficient in some manner, and in some manner we have to have the dependence so far as the others are concerned. But the disaster is one particular thing. When it happens, it definitely calls for the external help to be provided, and the various stakeholders, they get together for the purpose of providing that particular assistance to the area which is being affected by the disaster. What are the causal factors of the disaster? You see, in the normal circumstances, when we talk of the natural disasters and some man-made disasters, leaving aside the biological disasters which we are facing now in the form of this pandemic, we find that, well, it is poverty, it is population growth, it is rapid urbanization, it is moving from non-industrialized to industrialized society, environmental degradation and lack of awareness, etc. That these are some of the causal factors of the disasters. But then there are some factors which are probably not the causal factors of such kind of things at all. I mean, the present pandemic is probably a case in view, which definitely makes an individual to think about that, well, is it because of the poverty, is it because of the population growth or rapid industrialization, or moving from non-industrialized to industrialized society and so on and so forth? Probably no, none of this is there. But in the broader spectrum of disaster management, yes, it is definitely the thing which gets into being. So then one is made to look into that what are the effects of disaster. The effects of the disasters are, first of all, it is loss of life. It is injury which is being sustained. It is damage and destruction of property. It is cash crops, etc., which are disrupted, which are uprooted, and so on. It is disruption of production, disruption of our lifestyle, essential services, damage to national infrastructure, sociological and psychological after effects which are there, that of the disaster as it is. It brings to fore, when we look at these glaring effects of a disaster, that what is the analogy of the disaster? First thing is that the impact is sudden. It attracts attention and reaction. The impact is so sudden that it attracts attention and reaction. Of course, there are some slow-moving disasters also in the form of the drought, which we are able to make a prediction of. Or we can say that, well, these days the science has developed to the extent that we can monitor the cyclones and etc., which was not the case some time back. And then, well, it is the other analogy of the disaster speaks of it is that it is stunned, and there are a few records which are definitely there, and it does not make people to think about that why did it happen and what was our preparation and so on and so forth. And then the recovery is the other thing, that is mostly panic is there, and to some one doesn't know that what happens and what doesn't happen. Then there is destruction of life and property, and it is debris clearance, epidemic, unemployment, social and economic problems, and so on. These are all the aspects which get into the analogy of the disasters. Disaster management is not something which is taken in a vacuum kind of a manner. It exists in a given environment. And when we say that, well, it is a discipline and it is an area of study and it is an interdisciplinary approach or the collaborated approach which is there into being, it brings forth that this cycle of the disaster management, which has the forward as well as the backward linkages. The first phase is looked upon as the preparedness, where we tend to prepare ourselves for the disaster, which is having a forward linkage to the disaster response and the backward linkage to disaster recovery or disaster rehabilitation. And how well an individual or the people are prepared onto, that will definitely have a dividend to be in cash so far as the second phase of it, that is the disaster response, is concerned. The third phase of it is disaster recovery or rehabilitation. Now, in this particular scenario, one finds that there are number of the actors and the agencies which do play a role so far as the different facets of the cycle of disaster management is concerned. If we talk of the disaster preparedness, we feel that there is this mitigation, both structural and the non-structural, which is taken stock of over there. We again find that, well, it is other level of the preparedness. It is the planning which plays a crucial role over there. It is trying to look into that how we have to strengthen our infrastructure, whether it is health infrastructure or it is communication infrastructure and so on. So then the role which is being played by the risk analysis is to be taken into consideration. This is all the phases or the stages which do come across so far as the first phase of the disaster management cycle, that is disaster preparedness, is concerned. The second phase of the disaster management cycle is the disaster response, which is the stage which happens when the disaster has already struck. In the present day scenario, when we take into stock 20th day of April 2020, we find that we are passing through a very crucial disaster response phase so far as this pandemic coronavirus is concerned. The role which is being played by the paramilitary, by the police personnel, the role which is being played by the health administrators and by the hospital staff and the paramedic staff, the role which is being played by the civil society organizations, by the non-governmental organizations, by the media, both the print as well as the electronic media. These are all the stakeholders which are playing a role, and of course the major stakeholder which is playing a role over there is the community. So that is to be looked into both from the positive side as well as the flip side of the role of the community so far as their response is concerned. The third phase or the third stage of the disaster management cycle, it encompasses the disaster recovery, which is followed by the rehabilitation. It is the physical rehabilitation, it is economic rehabilitation, it is social rehabilitation, it is psychological rehabilitation all together. And then again this recovery and rehabilitation, it contributes to the preparedness for the future to come. So well, if this is the analogy of the disaster, here are the negative and positive aspects. Let us not find that disasters always have the negative aspects. Well, there could be some positive aspects also. Let us try to have a look at it. There are various aspects so far as the disaster is concerned. Let us say that the first alphabet is D. So the negative aspect is that well, it damages. The buildings are done away with, the infrastructure gets damaged, the trees are uprooted, the poles are washed away, kind of a thing. Everything is disrupted, everything is damaged. And the positive side of it is that well, we get a chance to redevelop, to rebuild, to reconstruct about it. So that is the negative as well as the positive side. So first of all, let us talk of the negative aspects only. It interrupts. I connotes interruption. Everything whichever is going on, that thing comes to a standstill. Person doesn't know that what is to be done. So well, at times we are trying to make the thing to the best suitable situation. At times we succeed, at times we fail, and in majority of the circumstances we find that it is the interruption that it interrupts, and then it takes quite long for that to be recovered. It is severe, of course. It is antagonistic and annoying. It is crude because it doesn't leave anything to be taken stock of. It is traumatic because the people are not able to know what to do and how to do it. We are absolutely shattered under that kind of a thing, and it is an emergent situation, and the risk involved is quite substantive. Now, when we look at it, we are able to develop. That is why we say that there is a correlationship between disasters and development. Does disaster lead to development? Or the other, some people say that development causes disasters. The other say disasters pave the way for development. It is correlated both sides, but the fact of the matter is that change is the law of nature. Whether we wish it or not, whatever happens, that is bound to happen. The change will definitely take place. One is reminded of the famous philosopher Hercules, who said that well, it is imminent. When you put your foot for the second time in the running water, you will find that the water beneath your foot has changed. So that is where the change is bound to happen. In the similar manner, development is to take place. Development takes place when we find that we are displaced, we are disturbed, we have been uprooted, and there is damage which has been done to it. So that is where we find that the disaster has the positive aspect so far as the development is concerned. Then we try to find out innovative ways for dealing with it. We lay more emphasis upon the sharing. We tend to become more and more aware about it, and we try to have the feeling of self-sufficiency so that we have to depend as less as possible on the forces which are outside our purview or outside our control or proximity. And then it is of course transformative, followed by it is that it educates the people, and ultimately it builds on to their resilience. Question is that when we talk of the disasters, the negative and the positive aspects, and if we say that positively, it speaks about the development. Now, development as it is a mesmerizing and a soothing concept. Everybody wants it. Many chase it, but a few get it. Who are those few? Those few are the ones, those who come in terms with the situation and try to emerge out of that for their betterment by putting the conscientious and the concerted efforts to that particular thing. Now, there comes the contradiction onto it, that well, do we mean that all our efforts whichever are being put across, all of them are bound to result towards the positivity? Well, on some accounts we may not feel it to be, but then definitely it is also said that it doesn't go waste. Something or the other we are always able to cull out of it or to make out of it. So this is where we find that the disasters are not always to be taken up negatively, but also one should try to look at the positive aspects of it. Some of you might be having this doubt in mind that well, why are we talking about that well, there is positive, what is positive about in disaster? Let us not forget it, that it is hope which sustains life. It is hope is always there. We always hope for the betterment, hope for the best. Otherwise, Well, everybody knows that what is the end? The end is the death. So, well, it is if the death is so imminent, then why are we so scared of it? No, we are not. We keep on endeavoring, we keep on working towards it, whereby we are able to de-stress the present situation and we are able to make maximum out of it, so as that we could re-energize ourselves and we could relocate all our energies and the stamina for the better days to come into being. Let us try to correlate it with the present scenario. What is going on? There is going on is this pandemic by the name of coronavirus. Epidemic is, we are all aware of that it is a simple way to know the difference between an epidemic and a pandemic, because it is to remember that the P in pandemic means a pandemic has a passport. A pandemic is an epidemic that travels from one place to another, and we have seen it. How it traveled from China to Europe and from Europe to India, from India other countries and then to India and then the South Asian countries and so on and so forth. So probably 192 countries which are affected by this particular thing. Then there is also something which we ought to know as students of disaster management, that if there is pandemic, then there is endemic also. An epidemic, try to know it that an epidemic is an activity, is actively spreading. Epidemic is actively spreading. New cases of the disease substantially exceed what is expected. That is what is epidemic. Contrary to it, endemics, on the other hand, are constant presence in a specific location. For example, malaria is an endemic to parts of Africa and so on. Then there is likewise epidemic and outbreak. Outbreak, we know, is that it is a sudden increase in occurrences of a disease in a particular time and place. It may affect a small or localized group or impact upon thousands of people across the entire continent. History stands testimony to the facts that disasters have been taking place. If we look into it, we find that 3000 BC also there was a virus which struck China in a Chinese village, and number of the lives were lost. So much so that the record which is available, it stands by it, that well, the bodies were put across in the buildings and they were burnt over there. Later on, when it was found, it got revealed that well, there were young, there were old, there were children, every sort of persons, those who were there, that was identified from the skeleton. The number of the casualties in that particular epidemic is not known. In the similar manner, when we try to talk of pandemics as they had been in the past, because that will give us some kind of the clue to learn about the disaster management as it is, as to know more about it is, that is this Antonine plague which happened in 165 AD. The death toll was 5 million, right? And then it is plague of Justinian, which was there in the 541-542 AD. Death toll was 25 million and it was a bubonic plague. The Black Death pandemic was there, 346 to 353. Toll estimated is 75 to 200 million. Third cholera pandemic, 1852 to 1860, death toll 1 million. Flu pandemic, 1889-1890, death toll 1 million. Sixth cholera pandemic, 1910-11, death toll 800,000 plus. Flu pandemic, 1918, death toll 20 to 50 million. And likewise, Asian flu 1956-58, death toll 2 million. Flu pandemic 1968, 1 million approximate. HIV AIDS pandemic at its peak 2005-2012, death toll 36 million. If that is the case, history had been taking count of these pandemics which had taken place in world over. The question is that, well, as I said earlier, the time is a big healer. We tend to forget about it. In the similar manner, probably we will forget this aspect also which we are passing through. Let us try to understand this coronavirus also which is inflicting upon us these days. Aspects are, first is C, that means cruel. It is cruel. So many people are losing their lives. People are getting admitted to the hospital. It is the respiratory problem and so on. and likewise it is obnoxious, and the R speaks of that it is repulsive, O speaks of it is offensive, N says that it is nasty, A is appalling, V brings into fore the veiled nature of coronavirus, I is insidious, R speaks of ruthlessness, U is ubiquitous, and S is swear. Question is, are we really passing through existential crisis? This particular term I got in a message from a very noted and revered educational administrator in the morning about existential crisis which is there. Are we really passing through the existential crisis? Yes, we are. We are attempting to know that what is the purpose of our living and how long we will be able to do it, and when we are not able to get an answer out of it, then we feel that we are passing through this particular existential crisis, and we need to look at it, because all that whatever we are hearing these days, we are seeing on the televisions, on our mobile phones and the computer networks and so on, that there are all these things about this deaths and the illness and the sickness and the people cooperating, people disrupting, somebody exposed, somebody is being attacked, so on and so forth. So this brings into focus number of negative feelings and the emotions which come into the minds of the individual, which lead to despair so far as the individuals are concerned, and they are caused because they attempt to put this question that what is the purpose of their life. And when they start to wonder what life means, though it is not uncommon to seek answer to that question, but with the existential crisis, people are unable to find answer to their queries. But is it really? If one looks at it, is that not imminent? It is imminent. All of us know that, well, a day will come when X, Y, Z, me, you, etc., we won't be there over there. But then the question is that if we try to look at it, do we not feel that, well, we will pass through this also? See the positivities which are getting into it, the lessons which we are learning therefrom. Number of things which had become a part and parcel of our life before this Janta curfew was imposed on the behest of the worthy Prime Minister of India, and then followed by the lockdown, which was supposedly to end on 14th of April, but was again extended and is extended now till 3rd of May, etc. Before that, people were used to a given lifestyle. We used to go to our offices, we used to perform the things, we used to go here, there, we were meeting each other and so on and so forth. Social functions were there, religious gatherings were there, political components were taking place, etc. Everything has come to an end. We have started living at a place wherever we are, at our own places, because it is being said that in lockdown one should not come out. Whatever we are having with us, we are making guzara with that. So there is a feeling of contentment which is there, which is coming into the minds of the people. Well, I don't mean to sound like it कि हम मोक्ष प्राप्ति की तरफ चल रहे हैं, ऐसी कोई बात नहीं है. But something whereby we are able to make the best out of the means which we have available with us. And then the other thing is that it is giving us an opportunity. That is the O part of coronavirus. The first O, which gives us an opportunity to plan the novel ways of existence. To plan the novel ways of existence. See, इसमें डरने का इतना भय नहीं है व्यक्ति को जितना उस भय का भय है. सो ये जो भय का भय है कि मौत हो जाएगी या बीमारी हो जाएगी, उससे भी बड़ा भय जिससे कि ह्यूमन बीइंग या व्यक्ति भयभीत है, वो ये है कि उसका परिवारजन वालों का क्या होगा अगर उसको कुछ हुआ तो उसके साथ वो भी इफेक्ट हो जाएंगे. That is another major thing which needs to be looked into it. And then is it not probably it will develop our resilience, the resilience of the people, those who are able to come out of it in a victorious manner. Because the way the country is going across, one finds it that there is nothing which can stop a way for not being resilient about it. And then it is the observance, we are observing and observing very minutely. You look at it, a person of the age of 60 plus, a person 70 plus, a young man of the in 30s and in 20s and so on. So much we have been attuned onto the new functioning. People are working from home. Yesterday the Prime Minister tweeted and said it that, well, we should probably forget about the kind of the offices which we used to have earlier. Now probably it is the home is the office, and the colleagues shall have to forget about the office breaks which they used to have with their colleagues. So from that particular end, a new kind of a thing which is opening up. So, well, let us try to know about it. Human mind is dynamic. We are not vegetables. We have the dynamism. We keep on thinking because we have the thinking potential, so we have the dynamism. So in that particular scenario, we try to make the things that we are able to perform the tasks which are required to be performed in the given circumstances under the given kind of the resources which we have available with us. Do we not feel, let us try to delve on it, do we not feel that as and how we are passing through this particular phase, because it says that it takes 21 days for a habit to die down and another 15-20 days for a habit to be inculcated. So maybe by the end of this particular lockdown, by 3rd of May, we would be able to have some kind of the habit whereby that extravagance or that the earlier styles of the living which the individuals were having, probably it would be done away with. And may it be that, well, we turn out to be more noble, we turn out to be more committed onto the tasks which are supposedly to be taken across without having those. Maybe if we were having, some of us were having, some people like me, those who were having some malicious feelings earlier, probably they would be giving an end to such kind of the malicious thinking. That is the other positivity which emanates out of it. And then of course it does speak of the adaptability which would be there. In the similar manner, when we find that it was the insidious nature so far as the negativity of coronavirus is concerned, then, well, it is the introspection which is the positivity from that particular eye being connoted, because we are introspecting, we are trying to know more and more deep, not about others but about my own self, about our own selves. We are introspecting that what had I been doing, was it really correct? Now here is the time when I am able to question myself to find out that where I would be. And in the similar manner, well, it is, if it is the ruthlessness was there, then here we find that it has been replaced positively. It will be replaced by rationality. Ubiquitous nature of coronavirus negatively would be replaced by unity, and the severity of it will be replaced by the satisfaction. Can we really, as a country, we can manage our disaster in that particular way? As I said, that IGNOU was the first university in the country to start a program on disaster management. We are pioneers in India in the open and distance learning so far as disaster management area is concerned. University and the Faculty of Public Administration worked on different projects in the country as well as outside the country. We have worked in numbers of villages across the states of the country. And everywhere at that point of time we used to feel it, that probably there is something which is missing in India when we try to compare ourselves with the developing nation. Could it be America? Could it be Australia? Could it be Canada? Could it be England? And so on and so forth. And we used to feel that probably, नहीं, हिंदुस्तान में वो बात बन नहीं रही जो दूसरे देशों में है. अरे भाई क्यों नहीं बन रही हिंदुस्तान में वो बात? Because you see, घर की मुर्गी दाल बराबर. We always used to feel we don't have that seriousness of the purpose. वो एक टेढ़ा सा मुंह बना के हम बोलते थे. We lack sense of commitment. We don't perform the things the way we should perform. Now here it is the coronavirus which is affecting whole of the globe, and see where India is. Without getting, you see, complacent about this scenario, it definitely gives a food for thought to think about. हिंदुस्तानी काम करते हैं, काम करना इनको आता. When whole of the country found that, well, there are no classes and so on, everybody started taking classes from their own homes. Teachers are busy, administrators are busy in planning the thing, students are also busy likewise for doing the thing. Well, it doesn't mean that everybody should come on to the ODL system, that we belong to ODL system, so everybody should come on to the ODL system. No, that is not the point. Point over here is that it is the newness and the uniqueness which will get more strengthened once we come out of this particular thing, and that we will. Why I am so being confident of it? Because the government of the country, the government of India had taken that kind of the step which is being appreciated world over. Of course, with a population of 138 crores, you see, it so happens that something does happen which disturbs us, and when it is shown on the TV channels and so on, it disturbs, but nevertheless, let us not be dismayed, let us not try to look at the thing in that particular manner. India is a country of villages, and our rural economy is really robust enough not to be affected by this coronavirus. We are a country of young people. The median age of India is 29 in the year 2020, in comparison to 38 in UK, 45.7 in Italy, 45 years in Spain, 42.3 years in France, 38.4 years in China, 39.6 years in Russia, and 48 years in Japan. Now, nevertheless, again, one is not trying to put finger onto the other. The one is just trying to make a point that, well, let us try to get across which are our strong wickets so that we can play comfortably and confidently on that wicket to get us victorious in this particular given scenario. Then our merchants and shops are not over leveraged. We are not having that much of the loan which is there. The fall in the oil prices will definitely lower the inflation and so on. And then, of course, the internal consumption of economy is strong enough, and the work from home is definitely making a big sense. Today, there is this opening of certain things in certain parts of the country. Slowly and gradually, in a phased manner, it will also come across. Let us try to look at it in a positive manner, that it has got us a chance to work in a scenario which is so heavily been affected by this particular thing known as coronavirus or COVID-19. This is the scope of disaster management definitely gets established that it is a wide scope. Probably anything and everything under the sun that gets affected by disaster management, and if disaster management is not in a proper manner, then probably there will be the negativities which will be coming across even in the economies, even onto the systems which were quite stabilized. If the action taken by the concerned, those who are managing the show are not in cahoots with the need of the hour, then probably those are going to be doomed away. So, theoretically, it is the post-COB, the theoretical aspect of the scope speaks of post-COB, that is planning, organizing, staffing, directing, coordinating, reporting, budgeting. And practical side, of course, it is the subject matter which has planning, preparedness, rescue, relief, health, food and shelter, livelihood. And of course, human element cannot be minimized or cannot be compromised. So, well, that brings into fore the psychological components of the disaster management as well as the socio-economic components. Development, of course, is the mainstay so far as the scope of development and disaster management is concerned, and as important as it is the comparative and the infrastructural components for dealing with the various things. So, well, let it be for the day enough kind of the thing to ponder over that disaster management is something which probably is the need of the hour for every institution and educational aspects and the offices to lay emphasis upon. IGNOU had taken up a project at the country level. We had worked in 11 states, in 54 districts. We conducted 432 training of trainers workshops for inculcating skills amongst the people at the grassroots level in disaster management. More and more such kind of the concerted efforts need to be taken across. Well, I don't mean to sell the disaster management as a profession, but definitely the issue is that it needs the attention, because this will definitely wade us through the crises which are being faced. Thank you very much. All the best to you.